Welcome to The Roofer Show with your host, Dave Sullivan. You found the podcast that helps roofing contractors grow their businesses, make more money, and have more free time.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Roofer Show podcast, the place to be if you want to grow a more profitable roofing business. I'm your host, Dave Sullivan, the roofer coach, and we have got a great show for you today because I've got AnneMarie Grisham from Ruby with us. And AnneMarie, I have been wanting to do this show for so long because the last time I had Ruby on was with your founder, Jill Nelson.
That's right.
Episode number 78. Okay, now we're on number 406. So this was a while ago. This is 2018. So we've got some catching up to do, I would say.
Just a bit. And gosh, Dave, absolutely delighted and privileged to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, as everybody knows, we've worked together since that time. And in a partnership, and the reason is because I really believe in this product. And I've got a lot of our contractors. This is one of the first things that I recommend that they do is get somebody to answer the damn phone. Okay. And it's surprising how many contractors don't. So we're going to get into that. But why don't you tell us a little about your story first and what's in it for our contractors?
Absolutely, Dave. So Ruby offers two products. We have our chat service and our reception service. And you and I are going to dig real deep into both of those a little bit further in the podcast. But on the chat side of the business, that's actually how I came to Ruby. So our chat service, imagine your website, a little chat box in the lower right-hand corner where a human can engage and go back and forth and answer questions, qualify leads for your web visitors. I sold that product, and that's actually how I came to Ruby, through the acquisition of that product. So I have been with Ruby, it's going on like 7 or 8 years now, and I really grew up on the sales side of the business. So selling our chat service and then our reception service, and then moving through the business towards partnerships and sales leadership. So I'm now the VP of sales and partnerships at Ruby. And part of why I was so excited to do this with you is because coming from the sales side of the business, I know so clearly how difficult it can be for contractors, particularly roofers, when they're up on a roof and their phone is ringing and they've literally got shingles in their hands, right? And they either miss that call or they're flustered and they're like, hey, like, what's going on? How can I help you? And it's a challenging experience for them, right? And it's so exciting for me to get to partner with folks like that, those small and medium-sized contracting businesses, particularly roofers, because Ruby is created and positioned in a way to help people in that exact position. So as the extension of your team, we want to sound like the in-house receptionist for your inbound phone callers. We want to wow them with how kind and personable, empathetic, and really listening, feel like your callers are listened to by our receptionists. We do everything from, qualify calls, book appointments, things of that nature. So all of that to be said, I have been really excited to have this meeting with you because I know how valuable our service can be to your contractors. And you and I have not you and I specifically, but you and Ruby, and then you and I more recently have just been working together for so long. So been really excited to have this meeting with you.
Well, great. Well, here's the problem. Okay. The number one gripe coming from buyers of home services, including roofing, is that contractors simply don't answer their phone. And all you've got to do is go to Google reviews. And I tell my contractors this, and I tell them to tell their prospects this also. You go to those 1 and 2 star reviews, and what you're going to find is everything involves communication. It's some communication problem. And generally, I can't get hold of them. I've got a question. I've got a problem. They don't answer their phone. They're nowhere to be found. Okay. And this is just a huge problem. So on that front, just having that communication with them, if you sell the job, being able to answer questions. And this is what Ruby is great about. Handling this, everything's communication. Now, on our show, when it comes to marketing, we talk about those touches with the customer, okay, prospect. So whether you take marketing 101, it's 7 or 8 touches before they get to know you, before they feel there's
Right.
trust. And it starts with that first phone call. It's the most important thing you can do because that's where you're setting you know, um, your first impression. As we say, we got
Absolutely.
one chance to leave that first impression, right? And
Right.
that's what it's all about. That's the beginning of the sale. And you start
It
there,
is.
and then the next touch, then the next touch, and the idea that they're going to be able to call back and say, "Hey, I've got a question about the quote," for instance. Well, you can direct them to the right people and so forth, and
That's
you have
right.
all this. I want to get into the details in that in a minute. But what I find that so many contractors are doing is turning these things over to voicemail. Okay, so they
Right.
just roll over. Now, we both know that, and from my experience, I'm not going to leave a message. I want to speak with somebody. I have a question, I have a
That's right.
problem, I want answers, and I want them fast. So they're just going to go to the next contractor.
Called
And
on that Google list, right?
this drives me freaking crazy. Okay. It's
Right.
if you're not answering your phone, either somehow, and this is why you should be doing it and not the contractor because they do a crappy job at it, and also you got some battle axe in the office. They're not doing a good job. So, you've got to answer that phone and with a friendly professional voice. And
That's right.
you're spending a lot of money to get that phone to ring. And even much more so now, we talk about the cost of customer acquisition now is just going through
Hmm.
it's literally going through the roof. It's so
That's right.
expensive to get that phone to ring. The pie is shrinking. There's fewer and fewer roofs being done these days. So you've got to do everything that you can to convert those into appointments. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you let you do some talking, but I'm really passionate about this, and
Yeah,
it's the start of the sale. You can't screw this up, and also you don't want to sound like chucking a truck, and that's what you do if
that's
either
right.
you're answering the phone as the owner or it just rolls over and you get somebody, "Hi, you reached blah blah blah." They don't leave a message because they know you're not going to call them back, and they're probably
That's
right.
exactly right. That's exactly right. So much of what you said just resonates with me so much. At Ruby, we often say that moments matter, and you can create a great first impression or you can create a negative first impression. And that first impression is no small thing. You said that's when the sale starts. That's exactly right. It's the beginning of trust forming or trust eroding. And as the contractor, gosh, I just feel for those guys because they've spent so much time investing in getting their business off the ground, doing what's necessary to become licensed, doing all of these different things so that they're ready to be a roofer, be on a roof, do the job, right? And sometimes something as simple as the phone that it kind of becomes maybe an afterthought because you're so focused on the actual business exactly as they should be, right? And then all of a sudden your business is up and running and you're operating and your phone's ringing and it's like, "Oh crap." Oh yeah, I need to like answer that thing, right? And that's exactly what Ruby does for you. So we are passionately focused on, and one of the foundational pieces of how Jill initially created our business over 20 years ago was wanting to create an experience for the little guys, for small and medium sized businesses, for contractors, for roofers, where they can actually focus on the day to day operations of their business exactly as they should, and not worry about the phone because you're going to have somebody that is personable, empathetic, kind, that's going to create that great first impression as soon as they call in. Dave, I know you and I talked about this the other day, but how many times have you called a business, whether it's your dentist, a different contractor, whatever, and they answer the call and it's just like, "Hey, thanks for calling. How can I help you?"
Mhm.
And they just sound like checked out and they sound bored and they sound like they hate their life or whatever. Ruby is the opposite of that. And it's wanting to create not just a nice first impression, but a wow worthy first impression. So if they call in, it's going to sound more like, "Thank you for calling ABC Roofing. My name is AnneMarie. How can I help you today?" And it's all of those things from the tone to the inflection to how we're able to answer questions to booking the job. et cetera, et cetera. That again, going full circle back to what you said a moment ago, it's all about creating trust and the great first impression. So that just really resonated with me when you were speaking that.
This is one of the first things we do when I pick up a coaching client. We go through this process and see what's going on. Okay, well, what are you doing? Let's start there, because when we're talking about our sales process, it's number one. How do you answer the phone? What do you
Right.
say? And how do you book that call? Because as you
Right.
mentioned, we're talking speed to lead. You know, the first sale you're making is booking the appointment. So don't screw that up. Okay. That's number one. That's your sale. Once you've got the appointment, now we move through our sales process. But you know, so many contractors, they have no idea that they're losing all these calls. They just say, "Hey,
Mm.
my phone's not ringing. What's going on?" Well, that's because people aren't leaving a message, you know? I had
Exactly. They hang up and call the next one on Google. Exactly.
exactly. Yeah. I had an experience with a client of mine here, just onboarding here the other day. I go, what do you do? He says, well, I just roll it over in a voicemail. Okay. Well, all right. When do you return the calls? Well, I get home and I've got 30 messages. Okay. And we know that half of those are going to be spam, and, you
Sure.
know, but you've got to go through those and dig out who's an actual customer. Well, most nights you get home after a long day of work, you go, that's about the last thing I want to do is go through
Exactly.
all of these things. It is crazy. I go, come on, really? So we've got him set up on Ruby. He's getting all this information. We onboarded him, which you've got a great onboarding process. I want to get into that in a minute. But the stress is just removed, you know, this weight has been removed off his shoulders, and he
Yeah,
can focus on
absolutely.
what he does. You know, he comes home, doesn't have to worry about it. Okay. So
Right.
that's great. Now, so let's talk about how this thing works. We're not talking about one of these crappy answering services like you got with your doctor is, you know,
That's right.
ring, 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 ring. And then you get somebody and you go, who am I talking with? You know, and we're not talking about to somebody in India. We're not talking on this
Correct.
scratchy line.
Hmm.
Tell us about it really is seamless. And I love how they do it. So tell us about um, what actually happens. I'm a customer, prospect. I call. What's going on?
Absolutely. Let's go through a common call flow in a moment. But before we do that, a couple of things that I want to call out that I think will really help create the context and the framework for these guys. So, Ruby has been the market leader for over 20 years in terms of virtual receptionist services. And you ask why? Why are they the leader? Why are they the gold standard? How can you say that? It's everything about the foundation of the service, both from a technical perspective to a human capital perspective to the ongoing training that happens beyond that. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind. In terms of statistics, like you mentioned earlier, Dave, it's all about speed to lead, right? 98% of our phone calls are answered by the third ring or sooner. So that's amazing. But maybe just anyone could do that, right? Maybe an old school service, it's not perhaps what they're looking for, where they could sound checked out or whatever, right? So not only do we have the statistics for speed to lead, 98% of those calls answered by the third ring or sooner, but also you have the quality of the human on top of that. And the quality of the human, I always say Ruby doesn't hire just anybody. We really look at the receptionists that we hire to screen them to make sure that they're going to be a great extension of your team. So things like ongoing empathy training, ongoing development opportunities. We want to make sure that we're taking really good care of our receptionists, offering them full medical benefits, things like this. We don't want this to be some, imagine a big call center floor with a bunch of folks that, dim lighting, that they don't love their life, right? We want to be the opposite of that. We want to go above and beyond to invest in our people, because we know when we invest in our people, they in turn invest in you, right? So everything from the investment that we have in our folks, the medical, the benefits, and then the ongoing career opportunities. For example, my partnership manager, she actually started 4 years ago as a receptionist, became a coach of receptionists, continued to get promoted. Now she works within corporate on our partnerships team. Perfect example. One of my account executives is the exact same way. He started as a receptionist, became a coach, and et cetera, et cetera. All of that to be said, those are examples of us investing and looking for quality people and wanting to have them continue to be bought into the business as a whole. Ruby is an ESOP, so we're all employee owned, and we really look for areas to empower everyone from our receptionist all the way to the top to have that buy-in and taking care of the business accordingly. So statistics, fast answering, right? Quality of humans, absolutely. And then the third piece of that is the technology. So the platform that our receptionist answer calls off of, it's all internally owned and proprietary. So in other words, we do not rely on a third-party service to support us if like something went wrong or there was a bug. You're not waiting for someone else to come help you out. We have an extensive and absolutely brilliant development team that supports us and supports our receptionists in the technology that we use. So all of that to be said, you have those three things in place that really create a foundation for us to be able to build and scale to support the people such as roofer clients and the calls that they're going to handle. So that was long, but I feel like that's important to call out before we talk about call flows.
Okay.
Happy to go there next if you like.
Well, I know that what you say is correct because one of the things that I do with my clients is I want to find out how they're answering that phone. Okay. And I call and I'll ask questions of whoever answers that phone. And you guys do a great job. The ones that don't, I'm like, okay, whatever. It just, it does not leave a great first impression to take that next step. Okay.
Right.
Now, you guys also, here's something that I think contractors don't realize is that they get so many calls off hours because
Yeah.
you get home, your homeowner gets home, they're getting together, they want to book an appointment, they want to speak with somebody. And with your service, you've got 24/7. We've got the chat also, which we can get into. But I think contractors underestimate the value of that, of how many prospects call after hours. And you've got to cover the bases, okay, as a contractor. It's the number one thing. If you don't do this, forget it. It's you can't operate a professional business. So that's something that I think is just great. So, but when I call, I've got questions. What do you do to sound like you're actually somebody that's working there? How do you answer those calls? How do you answer those questions? And how do you direct those perhaps to the right departments?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, let's say that you've got a contractor that says, hey, AnneMarie, hey, Ruby, I'm ready for you to answer my phones. From initial contact to being live with service is typically about 48 hours. It can be less than that. It could be a little more than that, depending on availability, but it's a quick turnaround time. So everything that we're about to say, folks often are like, oh, it's not like 3 weeks long or 2 months or what. It's like, no, it's like 2 days. We have this down to a science. So as we speak about that, keep that in mind. So to answer your question, how are we able to really sound in-house? It's about the questions that are asked, right? So when my account executives connect with your contractor and they're looking to build out a profile, we can do things like answer frequently asked questions. So for example, let's say that occasionally you have folks that do come into the office. I'm not sure that would be a common thing because usually it's your guys obviously going to their house. But let's say it was the case and it was like some obscure parking situation. We can have directions on if someone calls in and they're like, I'm lost and under a highway somewhere. Oh, hey, just turn a right at that stop sign. You're going to make a funny little left turn. And then there's that gravel parking lot. You'll walk up. I'm making something up. But point being, like, we can get that in depth in terms of directions on how to get into the office, directions I already said that, directions to get there. we have the weather app. We know what the weather is like. So if
Yeah,
someone
that's
calls
great.
in and they're like, my roof caved in, the receptionist is able to say, "Oh my gosh, in this rain, I'm so sorry. Wow, let's get you connected with who can help," right? So everything from like geographically what's happening physically in their location, we can speak to those because as long as you tell them to us, we can program those into the account. Um, and then also, we want to get to know your staff. Understanding some of your guys are one man shows. That's fantastic. We support one man contractors all the time. That's great. Some of them might actually have a dispatcher or a billing team or whatever, right? If that's the case, we want to know who is that human? What is their name? What is their title? And what types of calls do they most commonly get? So if somebody calls in and they're like, I don't know who I need to talk to, but I've got this bill and I'm freaking out, we will know billing equals Sharon or whatever, right? It's like, oh my gosh, hey, no problem. We want to help you. Sharon is the right person to help you with that. Just a second. Let me see if she can take your call right now, right? And so it's all of those little things, everything from knowing the types of calls that you're going to get and who is best supported to handle those, and or if you'd like them to handle, if you'd like us to handle them ourselves, to parking instructions, to what's happening with the weather, to if the same person just called in 5 times and they call again, hey Bill, thank you again for calling back. What's going on? How can I help? Recognizing that that same person just called in 5 times or whatever it might be. It's that recognition and all of those little things that add up to people really feeling heard and taken care of, and like it's a true extension of the internal office.
Well, you guys do a great job with onboarding, and we are touching on that. But I work with your sales team, Kyle. I like to be on that onboarding call with my clients because we've got considerations with number one is the pre-qualification process. Okay.
Right.
Is this somebody that is actually a real lead or not? Well, here are the questions that we need to ask. And those are different
Mm,
for different contractors. And that's why I
true.
like to have them involved with what's going on. Okay. And we go through those. And when you ask those questions, well, do you own the home? Oh, no, I'm a renter. Well, okay,
Right.
that's not our client. Okay.
Right.
Or, yeah, I'm in an apartment building and I got a leak or whatever it is. We know these things. Okay. And this is what we can pre-qualify. That's not a true lead. So we don't want to have to screw around with it necessarily. And I got to think, I know that, that in my business, you've got to have 50% of the calls are solicitors, scammers, whatever. And
Right.
you spend so much time with that. And here's what I see as a typical contractor.
Mm.
You've got the jack of all trades in the office, master of none, which is you're doing, you got somebody in there that's doing bookkeeping. You got somebody
Sure.
that's doing dispatch. You've got somebody that's doing this. So if you're working with numbers and bookkeeping, you got to answer the phone and you try to come back and do these things. It does not
That's
work.
right. That's
So
right.
this is why we talk about focusing on those tasks, doing the right jobs for the right people, and this is
Dave, and that
something.
actually just really resonates. I've got to speak to that because you're speaking my
Mhm.
language here. I was just talking with actually a roofing company out in Florida last week. I think it was last week. They were onboarding with us. And one of the things that we heard them say, which I hear all the time, is, well, I've got a business manager and they can answer the phones. Or so I thought. And it's gotten to the point where I realize how unrealistic that is. And to be fair, empathetically, I understand how you could have that thought, right? It's like, well, they're doing these different admin tasks, they can also pick up the phone. Like initially it seems like that might make sense. But if you really unpack that thought, think about it. What all are you wow, let me try that again. What all are you having them do? They're doing filing. They could be doing dispatching, depending on how many roles you have. They could be doing a lot of different things, like you said. Uh, Jack of all trades, master of none. And then between all of those various tasks, think about focus, right? So you're in the middle of doing some filing and filling out this paperwork or what have you. And the phone rings. That's a distraction. You're now answering the call. It could be something quick where you transfer it to someone else. More often than not, it's going to be a call where you need to understand what's going on. Are you booking a new lead? Is it an existing client that's having a frustration? It could be 5 minutes that you could all of a sudden be on the phone for 20 minutes, right? And now when you eventually end that call, you're trying to get back to your task and you're like, all right, where was I? You know what? I want to grab a Coke out of the fridge. You know what? I need to go to the restroom. You know what? Da 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 da. All of a sudden, that one interruption that seems small, if that happens 5, 10 times a day, the amount of time and efficiency that you're losing is actually really substantial. And Ruby comes in and we're like, hey, we'll answer all of your calls. Every call goes straight to Ruby and we screen it. And then if that business manager is available, we'll not just send a call straight through to you. We'll ring you first and say, hey, Sharon, it's AnneMarie at Ruby. I have so-and-so on the line. Is this a good time? Or would you like me to do intake, take a message? How can I help? And they could say, you know what? I'm actually between things. It's a perfect time to send them through. Or they could say, yeah, I'm just like frazzled. Please don't. In which case we'll follow the call flow like normal and book the lead, do intake, take a message, what have you, right? So I just had to interrupt there, Dave, because that's exactly what Ruby is for. Right. It's so that you can stay focused and if your phone is ringing, it's because we've already screened it and it is actually meant for you. And even in that case, if it's not urgent, you can still say, it's not a good time and I'll take a message. So it goes from this frantic feeling of your phone ringing and like knowing you have to answer it to, if my phone rings, it's screened. It's not spam. It's not a solicitation. It's a call meant for me in my role at the business. And I can choose to take it or not at that point.
And with that distraction back and forth, you're not focused on that prospect. And,
exactly.
I go through this with sales guys. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't talk to a prospect and you're watching Oprah in the background or some stupid thing like this. Okay.
It just doesn't sound great.
You're distracted, and you're not, get your feet on the ground, focus, be friendly, think it through, and be fully attentive. That's a no-brainer.
And the thing is, when they've been on the roof all day, they deserve to go watch Oprah or ESPN or whatever. They shouldn't have to listen to their phone ringing off the hook, which you mentioned earlier. Ruby is 24/7, 365. We're available anytime. We don't nickel and dime you for that. It's all inclusive. If you want us to answer your phone at 11 p.m., 3 a.m., we will answer your phone at 11 p.m. or 3 a.m. And likewise, if it's an emergency, we can set up emergency protocols. And I always tell our contractors, you define what an emergency is. In other words, if someone calls in and is like, this is an emergency, our receptionist is going to be curious and empathetic and tell me what's going on. How long has it been going on? What's happening? And then again, just because the caller says it's an emergency doesn't mean it's, we're reactive and we just do whatever they say. I always tell our contractors, you inform us what actually qualifies as an emergency, and then we'll follow call flows to your preference in that case. But if it is a true emergency and the contractor agrees that it is, such as, hey, we're in Florida and the roof caved in. We have some of those calls right now. How do you want us to prioritize those? And we have best practices that we do recommend for those emergency call flows, but we also will customize them to however they would like them to operate in those cases.
I'm also assuming that your people, their car doesn't break down on the way to work. Their dog has fleas, so they can't go, come in. It's just, all on and on and on. You've got somebody that's actually 24/7. They don't take vacation. They don't do all these things.
Exactly.
And it is also a fraction of the cost. I mean, when you pencil this out and you're looking at having somebody, wages, perks, on and on, and just
exactly.
having to deal with people. I mean, I like to have fewer people, the better, because it's just one less personality that you've got to deal with. And I've been to companies where nobody likes the receptionist, so there's this big old argument going back. Yeah, it's a mess. So anyway, enough of that.
Dave, I gotta respond to that because again, this is why we love working with you. It's just speaking my language. Folks will be like, well, I can hire someone internally and it'll be fine. And I always tell them, I'm like, hey, if you feel like do what you feel like you need to do, first of all, always. I just want to inform you of what we commonly see. People will go to the effort of hiring someone. Now, let's talk about all the labor that involves. You have to write a job description first. You need to make sure that you have it outlined and it's written in the way that you want. You need to post the job description. You need to conduct interviews. After you've conducted interviews, you have to decide who you like. Maybe they've moved on and you're starting that process all over again. Or best case scenario, they accept and they get started. Now you have to train them. You need to tell them about how everything works in the internal office. You need to your point, Dave, benefits, PTO, sick days, medical, all of these things you have to offer them, right? And this happens all the time. We hear this all the time. Someone will call in who we spoke to like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. They hired a receptionist, and guess what? They did all of that work and then they quit unexpectedly. They just didn't show up again. Right. And they were paying that person, minimum wage is going up and up in the country. So let's say you're paying them at least, $12 to $14 an hour on the low end. If they're working full time, just 8 to 5, forget after hours, just 8 to 5. You're paying that person around $2,400 a month, right? And that's on top of benefits, sick days, PTO, all of the other costs associated, right? And they could just quit on you and you'd have to start all over again. I just feel so bad. Like I've seen it so many times. Or you can hire Ruby. We will sound like an in-house extension. You don't have to pay us benefits, PTO, holidays, medical, anything like that. You might pay us, could be a few $100, $1,100, $1,500, what have you, but it's going to be cheaper than an in-house receptionist. And we're going to be able to be there 24/7, 365. So you're getting the coverage extension beyond what you would have paid your in-house person. You're not having to worry about the overhead. And the biggest thing, you're not having to worry about someone quitting unexpectedly and you being at zero all over again.
Yeah, and this is just not for the small contractor. I've got a client that's $10 million in annual sales, got a big operation. They get a lot of calls coming in, and they use Ruby for everything, and
right.
It has just changed their whole business. I mean, they were so screwed up. They had so many calls coming in. Nobody knew what was going on. They didn't know how to direct these calls. And it was just chaos, the whole front office. But one thing I want to talk about is the Ruby app, because this thing is great. And this is especially for the smaller contractor, because you can control this. You can, tell us about that. You tell us what this will do for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ruby approach to the service that we offer, again, we consider ourselves the market leaders. We consider ourselves to be like white glove, all inclusive. We don't want you to be stressed about, well, do I get that if I pay for this or anything like that? So the Ruby app, which is obviously on your phone, to the Ruby portal, which is a desktop view that you can see on your computer. Like all of these things that we're going to reference are all inclusive with your service. So the Ruby app was created particularly for folks that are constantly on the go, such as roofers and contractors in general. So you're always on the go, you're in the truck, you're going to your next job. You need to have your business in your palm that is extremely simple to use and accessible, right? Simple to use, accessible, 100%. So what the Ruby app does, it has a log of every interaction that Ruby Receptionist has with your callers. So whether we transferred a call to Sharon, the business manager, or to your dispatch team, or did intake and took a message, whatever the call flow was, which we would customize with you all, a log of that with timestamp and everything is right there in the Ruby app. So you can see everything in a single place. You can see the messages, the calls, all of that. Plus, you can see various call tags. So you can see how many leads that we've generated for you, how many leads have been captured. You can see how many minutes you've used. You purchase a pool of minutes at Ruby. That's what you do pay us for. We'll talk about that more in a moment. And you can see how many minutes you've used in your plan, right? So everything from billing to activity log to insights, statistics, metrics, all of that is accessible inside of the Ruby app as well as the portal. One thing I love to call out for our roofer contractors with the Ruby app, is the ability to set a temporary status. So when you initially create your profile with Ruby, I always tell our contractors, your account with Ruby is a living thing. You can call us whenever and we can make adjustments, updates, whatever you want. I actually encourage that. You can set it and leave it if you want, but more often than not, especially with guys that you're working with, Dave, I know you're focused on scaling business. You are going to scale your business, which means that things will continue to grow and evolve, right? And if you add another team member or change this or that, give us a quick call. We're right there with you. We're updating alongside you, right? So all of that to be said, when you initially create your profile with us, we'll create call flows for you. How do you want certain types of calls handled, right? We'll customize those to their preference. Now, let's say that they have a call flow where if Dave was the owner and the main roofer contractor, right? And you prefer to actually talk to the leads yourself versus Ruby or someone else. You would actually like to do that yourself when you're not on a roof, right? So the call flow could be, if available, if Dave is available and a lead calls in, transfer the call to Dave, right? And I'd say, hey, Dave, it's AnneMarie with Ruby. Got so-and-so, you ready? And you say yes, and we transfer it through. Now, let's say that's just like the typical 9 to 5, whatever call flow for Dave Sullivan, right? Now, let's say that Dave is on top of a roof and he's like, there's no way that I should be answering this call. I know, because Dave told me not to do that. They can go into the app and create a temporary status that says, I'm on a roof for the next 5 hours, do intake, take messages, or transfer lead calls to John, or do intake and schedule the appointment, or do this or do that or whatever, right? So they can have a temporary status that they simply open the app, click the status button, type in busy till 9 p.m. or busy the rest of the day, and we'll know to not follow the typical call flow and follow the status instead. So that type of a feature is really, really helpful for a lot of our contractors.
I like it because, there's times where, say, I'm waiting for this deal to close, and I'm just waiting for this guy to call me. Well,
Exactly.
we can set that up, and the call comes in at 8 o'clock at night. You can forward that directly to me and I can close that deal. So
Exactly. And when you
great.
protect the after hours time, right? It's like, if it's just anything, don't bug me. We want to support you having a personal life, right? Like Ruby's got you. Go log off, enjoy your family, enjoy the game, enjoy whatever you want to do. But again, they could set a temp status. It's like, but if you see this person calling in, call me. And it's like, okay, great. Everything else we've got, but we know if John Doe or whoever they say in their status calls in, we should go ahead and try to transfer that call to you. And you know that if your phone is ringing from us, again, it's going to be John Doe, because everything else we're taking after hours call scripts for.
You told me that you came from the chat business. So let's talk about your chat. What is it? Chat. It's not a bot.
Chat
It's
service.
a real person.
Yeah,
Chat
it's not
service.
a bot. It's a human.
Right.
That's right.
Because, and a lot of people say, oh, those things don't work, but they convert. They really do work because, again, this after hours. I like the way you explained it with the storefront. Go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Ruby, we often will talk about how a given business, their website is kind of like their virtual brick and mortar store, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody comes to your website, imagine that's kind of like your virtual storefront, right? So if somebody were to walk into your actual brick and mortar store, would you just like stare at them and like wait for them to do something? Or would you greet them and say, hey, welcome in. How can I help you today? Right? You would obviously greet them. Likewise, we think about your website as that virtual storefront. So what the chat service does visually, if it's helpful for folks, imagine your web page is like this, right? It's your big rectangle. And in the lower right-hand side is a little box. It looks like just a chat box. If you remember like AIM Messenger, something kind of like that. And the website visitor can click on that box and it's free text and they can ask whatever. Hey, I'm looking for pricing. Hey, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for that. And on the other end is a Ruby chat agent. In other words, it is not a bot. It is not an automated response. It is a human, red blood breathing human being who will be on the other end, all based in the United States. None of us are outsourced. And they will respond to them and they'll say, hey, thank you for reaching out to ABC Roofing. How can I help you today? Hey, I'm looking for pricing. Not a problem at all. I see you're on our pricing page. You can easily reference fill in the blank, right? But the whole point is that we are going to engage with them, and they are trained to be, again, just like on the phone, personable humans focused on lead capture. So, hey, what was your name? What were you, interested in? Great, we can, get that appointment booked for you, so on and so forth. Some of the funny interactions that we'll have is occasionally the web visitor will come in and say, is this a real person? What did you have for lunch today? Like, prove to me that you're a person, right? And the receptionist will say something silly like, oh, hey, thanks for visiting. I actually just finished a grilled cheese. What did you have for lunch today? And just like have a moment of a silly interaction like that. Like, yeah, we're real humans here. So yeah, the whole point again with that feature is to engage with them, answer questions, and qualify leads.
I love it because we underestimate how many people are coming after hours, and they're kind of poking around. They're going through your website, and you're exactly right about your website is your storefront, and the goal of a good website is get them to open the door and come on in, to go deeper. How do we capture those visitors and not have them bounce away, and this is a great way to do it.
Especially if they're spending time like investing in any sort of marketing where they popped up on Google. Like you did something to make that happen. You had to take actions to create the website, right? These are all like administrative tasks that they've had to do and spent time and money and effort into doing. And then think about it, like you've done all that work in order to get that web visitor there. And then you could just be ignoring them. Like it's like you've gotten to the finish line and you just need the last piece to actually capture that lead. And depending on whether time of day could definitely be a factor, generationally, I think it could be a factor, but some folks just aren't going to pick up the phone. And so obviously, Ruby's going to support you if and when they do pick up the phone, but for that more hesitant person, or for the person that's like, well, I'm not going to call, it's 11:30 at night, they can pop into the chat and know that they're going to be taken care of in the exact same kind, personable, human sort of experience.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about your programs. I went on the site actually earlier before we got on, and one thing that I really liked was you have an online demo that I thought was pretty cool, and I hadn't seen that before. And I think people should go check that out because it's got that conversation, talks about the way that that you do business. I really like that. But what are the programs that you've got? What can you offer our guys?
Yeah. So we like to make this how I affectionately like to refer to as stupid simple. So the way that it works is we offer a month-to-month service agreement. That's it. You're not signing your life away on a contract. You purchase one or two services. Again, the two services that Ruby offers are virtual receptionist, which is handling your phone calls, and the chat service, which is handling your web traffic through the chat service on the website. You can buy one, you can buy both. And in either case, whether it's one or both, it's just a month-to-month agreement. That is it. You pay us for one thing. We bill based off of what are called receptionist minutes, which are essentially from the time that Ruby answers the call to either transfers the call through to you or disconnects the call and wraps up the call. That's like the time that you're paying for. So in other words, when we transfer the call through to you, we're not paying for when you were talking to the caller, right? Likewise with chats, it's based off of the number of conversations. So let's say Dave, or I chatted into ABC Roofing and you and I have a back and forth for many minutes or whatever. That entire conversation of the back and forth is what we would call like one qualified chat conversation. So that's how you pay us on the chat side. So minutes on the receptionist side, conversations on the chat side of the business. And so it's based off of volume. That's it. On the receptionist side, we're going to want to understand on average, like how many inbound calls do you typically get in a given month? And then we're obviously going to talk through how do we handle those calls. And between those two things, we're going to have an understanding of, okay, you on average get 150 calls a month. We talked through how we're going to handle calls for billing versus leads versus all the different types of things you might get. And each of those calls are going to be about 2 minutes. Sometimes some calls are longer, some calls are shorter, right? What have you. But if you have 150 calls and they're each 2 minutes, it's about 300 minutes, right? So it's giving you an idea of what you can expect from a minute perspective. So to wrap that up with a bow, you purchase a pool of minutes that you would work through for the month. That's it. If you go a little bit over, that's okay. There's a per minute overage rate for each plan, but that's all you pay us for. So if you want us to answer 24/7, 365, no extra fee. If you want us to do scheduling, no extra fee. If you need multiple people to have access to the app and the portal, no extra fee. If you need bilingual services, no extra fee, like so on and so forth, right? So you're paying us on minutes. Everything else is like white glove, all inclusive, and we're here to support you on how to utilize those various features.
Now, I don't have to sign up on a year contract or anything,
That's
do
right.
I? And
Nope.
so
Everything is month to month, meaning you can cancel anytime. We're a big believer in that. Put our money where our mouth is. You shouldn't be strong armed into some long-term contract. We want to earn your business every month.
so my risk is pretty low if
Well, your
I don't
risk
like
is
it for
really
some
zero.
reason.
Because on top of all of that, it's a month-to-month agreement, first of all. Plus, for new users, we actually include a 21-day money-back guarantee. So we're like, hey, if for some reason this doesn't work, you're literally not losing a penny within the first 21 days. I think it's like up to 500 minutes or 21 days, something like that. But we want to make it risk-free. We want to make it brainless for you. And so we include that for new users as well.
That's why I love you guys. I mean, it's been what is this, like 6 years or so forth? We've worked together for a long time. And as our listeners know, if I can't stand behind something, I'm not going to recommend it. And that's why I love working with you guys. But AnneMarie, how do I get started on leaving this great first impression for my business?
Yeah, absolutely. So give us a call. We have a phone number for you guys, and it is 866 613 1332. So again, that's 866 613 1332. That will go straight to my account executives, and they'll be able to support you in the process. We'll be able to get you up and running within a day or two. It's a quick turnaround time. We have this thing down to a science in terms of onboarding. And when you call in, make sure to mention Roofer Coach.
There you go.
That's right. Mention the Roofer Coach. We all know who he is. And on top of Roofer Coach, also mention, I told Dave, I'm giving you all early access to our Black Friday sale. So mention the Ruby Black Friday sale. And when you do, as long as you purchase a pool of minutes that's 100 minutes or more, you'll get $100 off of your first 3 months of service. So that's a $300 value total.
That's great. Tell them Dave sent you.
That's right. Tell them Dave sent you.
Any other takeaways you want to give our guys before we wrap up? And gals, you reminded me of saying that. So
hey, just any humans in the space, right?
right.
No, I feel like we definitely hit the high points, Dave. Thank you so much for having me, and hope to hear from you all soon.
Sounds great. And let's make it less than, what is this, 6 years until we speak again.
Let's do it again sooner than later.
Great. Well, thanks so much. It's really a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Dave.